Hello class, welcome to chapter 4, which will be on body organization and homeostasis. We'll look at the organization of your body from cells to organ systems, and we'll look at specifically skin a little bit as we go into homeostasis as well. We'll first talk about tissues, which is a group of cells of similar type that work together to serve a common function. And you should know these 4 human types of tissue: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. The 4 types of epithelial tissue, epi, that prefix means on or upon. So this type of tissue covers all of your body surfaces. It lines your cavities and organs. It forms your glands. Connective tissue provides support and protection for organs. It serves as a storage site for fat, and it participates in our immunity. Muscle tissue makes up your muscles, so it helps with body movement. It also your muscles move fluids throughout the body, depending on what type of muscle tissue it is. And then nervous tissue is made up of all of your neurons or nerve cells, which will conduct nerve impulses through the body. All epithelial tissue have a free surface that may be specialized for protection, secretion, or absorption, and a basement membrane that binds the epithelial cells to anything underneath them, such as connective tissue. The 3 basic shapes of epithelial cells are suited to their functions. So we can have epithelial cells that are squamous epithelium, which are flat, cuboidal epithelium, which are cube-shaped, or columnar epithelium, which are column-shaped. And these cells can either be a single layer of cells, in which we call them simple, or multiple layers of cells, in which we would call them stratified. So squamous epithelium has flattened cells, and its shape allows for diffusion of material and can provide a slick surface to reduce friction. You'll find these in your capillaries and also in your lungs. Cuboidal epithelium has cube-shaped cells, and they are specialized for secretion and absorption. And then the columnar epithelium has column-shaped cells, which are specialized also for secretion and absorption, and they line the small intestine. So here's a look at examples of simple epithelium, 1 layer of flattened cells located in your lungs, heart, and blood vessel linings. And that allows for exchange of nutrients, gases, and wastes. Stratified epithelium, stratified squamous is several layers of flattened cells. Stratified cuboidal is 2 layers of cube-shaped cells found in some mammary glands, sweat glands. They function in protection. And simple cuboidal is 1 layer of cube-shaped cells. These are located in the linings of your kidney tubules, and they function in absorption and secretion. So here's a review of epithelial tissue and examples of where they're located and also their function. Epithelial glands can be exocrine or endocrine, and the word exo means out and endo means inside. So exocrine glands use ducts to secrete their substances, leading to body surfaces, cavities, or organs, whereas endocrine glands don't have any ducts, and they secrete their products, hormones, into spaces just outside the cells, but in the body. Connective tissue is the most abundant and widely distributed. It's the most diverse tissue in the body. Cells are contained in an extracellular matrix of protein fibers and ground substance. The protein fibers we have that make up connective tissue are collagen, elastic, and reticular fibers. And the ground substance is anything non-cellular. It can be solid like bone or fluid like blood or cartilage. There's 2 categories of connective tissue. It can be connective tissue proper or specialized connective tissue. And within connective tissue proper, we get loose or dense connective tissue. And loose connective tissue we'll find in this cushions organs and provides insulation in your body. It contains many cells and fewer loosely woven fibers, whereas dense connective tissue is made of many tightly woven fibers, and you'll find dense connective tissue in all of your ligaments, tendons, and in the dermis of your skin, which is a layer of your skin. The specialized connective tissue that will go through are cartilage, bone, and blood. Cartilage is tough but flexible. It serves as a cushion between your bones. Cartilage does not have blood vessels or nerves, so it heals much more slowly than bone. There's 3 types of cartilage: hyaline, elastic, and fibrocartilage, and they differ in how flexible they are and where they're located. Bone protects and supports anything internal to your body, such as your skull bones will protect your brain. Your rib cage protects your thoracic organs like your heart and your lungs. It stores lipids, calcium, and phosphorus, and it produces blood cells in red marrow. Your blood then is a liquid matrix of plasma, where elements of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets are suspended within it. So here's an example of where areolar connective tissue is found: cartilage, adipose, and bone. And feel free, as you guys are watching my videos, to pause them at any time. There's another great review of connective tissue, the types, where they're found, and their functions. So as we move up, we'll continue on with muscle tissue. It varies in structure, location, and whether it's voluntary, whether you control the action, or involuntary, where this type of muscle tissue will happen and move substances through your body on its own. So we have skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle tissue. Here's a great review of the types and where they're located. So skeletal muscle is long, cylindrical, striated cells. It's voluntary, so that means you control the movement of your skeletal muscle. Most are found attached to your skeleton and are responsible for voluntary movement. Cardiac muscle is branched and striated. It's found in the wall of your heart, and it pumps blood through the body. Cardiac muscle is involuntary, and that just means your heart is contracting and moving without you telling it to. Then smooth muscle, you have cells tapered at each end. Smooth muscle is found in the wall of hollow organs, such as your intestines, tubes, and blood vessels. And contractions in your digestive system move food along, again, involuntarily. This happens without you knowing it. Nervous tissue makes up the brain, the spinal cord, and nerves. It consists of neurons and neuroglia. Neurons are the nerve cells themselves that generate nerve impulses and conduct them to other neurons, muscle cells, or glands. And neuroglia support, insulate, and protect neurons. So here's a look at a neuron, a nerve cell. The axon is the elongated portion. The cell body is the central processing center, kind of the brain of the neuron. And then we have dendrites, which are little fingers coming off of the cell body that receive the signal. Neuroglia are much smaller cells, and they will just help support the neuron in their functions. Then we'll look at how cells are attached to each other. We can have a tight junction, an adhesion junction, or a gap junction. Tight junctions form a leak-proof seal, and they are found between cells lining the urinary tract and intestines. Adhesion junctions resemble a riveted joint, and they are found between skin cells. And gap junctions have small holes connecting the cytoplasm of adjacent cells, and they're found in your cardiac muscle cells in your heart. So here are examples of tight junctions, adhesion junctions, and gap junctions. And you can see how each kind of looks, how it holds the cells together, where there's a space between them, how the gap junction has protein channels. So this is a great picture showing what they each look like and where they are found. Organs then are composed of 2 or more different tissues that work together to perform a specific function. And an organ system is composed of several organs with a common function. There are 11 major organ systems in the human body, and sheets of epithelium supported by connective tissues called membranes cover your body cavities and organ surfaces. We can have a mucous membrane that lines passageways that open to the exterior of the body. A serous membrane lines the thoracic and abdominal cavities and the organs within them. Synovial membranes line cavities of freely movable joints, such as your knee or elbow, and the cutaneous membrane, such as the skin, covers the outside of your body. So these are the 11 major organ systems. Integumentary system is skin, skeletal system, muscular system, nervous system. Endocrine system are all of your hormones and glands. Cardiovascular system is your heart, your blood vessels. The lymphatic system protects against infection and returns tissues and fluids to the bloodstream. Respiratory system are your lungs and the exchange of gases. Digestive system, urinary system, creates urine and filters blood, and the reproductive system. Most of the organs are suspended in internal body cavities that protect vital organs and allow them to slide past one another and change shape. You have two major body cavities, the ventral cavity, which ventral means front and dorsal means back. So ventral cavity and dorsal cavity. The ventral cavity is made up of your thoracic and abdominal cavity separated by the diaphragm, and the dorsal cavity is made up of your cranial and spinal cavity. The cranial cavity surrounds the brain, and the spinal cavity houses the spinal cord. So here's a look at the body cavities. Again, they are spaces within your body that hold specific organs. You can see here the ventral cavity contains, each pleural cavity contains a lung, and the pericardial cavity contains the heart. So that those make up the thoracic cavity. The abdominal cavity is right below it underneath the diaphragm. Then your dorsal cavity contains your brain, and the spinal cavity contains the spinal cord. Then the integumentary system is composed of skin and any derivative of skin, such as your hair, your nails, sweat glands, oil glands, wax glands. The skin is our largest organ, so we call it an organ. Functions of the skin are protection. It's kind of your body's first line of defense against bacterial invasion, UV radiation from the sun, and any sort of physical and chemical stress. It prevents water loss, it regulates your body temperature, it synthesizes vitamin D, and it also receives stimuli, such as touching a hot stove. There are nerve endings that will be able to sense pain, or vibration, or feel, or touch. The skin has several layers. The epidermis, the thin outer layer, the dermis lies underneath it that contains your nerves, blood vessels, and glands. And the hypodermis is the layer of loose connective tissue just below the epidermis and dermis. The epidermis consists of several layers of epithelial cells, where the outer surface is made up of dead skin cells that's continuously sloughed off, and the deepest layer is composed of rapidly dividing skin cells. There are no blood vessels in the epidermis, but it receives nourishment from the dermis. These cells die as they move towards the surface. There's protective properties that are within these cells, and they come from a protein called keratin. The dermis then consists primarily of connective tissue where your blood vessels, nerves, glands, and hair follicles are located. It does not wear away, and it has collagen and elastic fibers found in the lower layer. And they just help to allow your skin to stretch and return to its original shape. And the hypodermis is also called your subcutaneous layer. It anchors the skin to the tissues of other organ systems beneath it, and it functions to protect temperature regulation and fat storage. It's not usually considered a part of the skin, but this is also known as kind of your fatty layer, the hypodermis. So here are the layers of the skin. You can see your epidermis is located here. The epidermis in itself has 5 different layers to it, so no blood vessels or nerves. And the dermal layer is where we see blood vessels, nerves, hair beginning to grow, and glands. And then the hypodermis is the fatty layer of connective tissue below it. Skin color is determined by blood flow, so the amount of blood that is flowing through that dermis layer, and then the distribution and quantity of the pigment melanin. And melanin is produced by melanocytes at the base of the epidermis. It comes in 2 forms. It can be yellow to red or black to brown. In tanning, the melanocytes respond to UV radiation by increasing the production of melanin. We all have the same relative number of melanocytes and melanin, but the different ratios of these two forms are what give us different skin pigmentation. The epidermis gives rise to hair, your nails, oil glands, sweat glands, wax glands, and even teeth, which we'll cover in digestive system. Hair is the primary function is to protect our body. It grows over most of our body. It is composed of a shaft that is below the skin surface and a root that extends into the dermis or hypodermis where it's embedded in a follicle. Nails protect the tips of our toes and our fingers. They also function as sensory antennas because they're extremely sensitive, and they also assist in manipulation. Then oil glands we can find everywhere in our body except the palms of our hands and the soles of our feet. Oil is important for lubricating the hair, the skin, keeping things from drying out, and it contains substances that inhibit bacteria. Your sweat glands produce sweat that helps in the regulation of body temperature. Some metabolic wastes are also secreted in sweat. Then your wax glands are found in your external ear canal. And wax is important for protecting the ear by trapping small particles that could get into the ear canal. UV radiation of sunlight causes your melanocytes of your skin to increase their production of melanin. And melanin will then absorb UV radiation before it can damage the genetic information of the deeper layers of the cells. But unfortunately, this protective buildup of melanin is not instantaneous. So we get to skin cancer, which is very dangerous. UV radiation will actually alter the genetic material in your skin cells so that the cells grow and divide uncontrollably, forming a tumor. There's 3 types of skin cancer. Basal cell carcinoma is the most common. Squamous cell carcinoma is the second most common, but melanoma, which fortunately is the least common, but it's also the most dangerous, is the least common but most dangerous type of skin cancer. So please wear sunscreen when you're outside this summer. To limit your risks of skin cancer, you can avoid exposure in the sun. Do everything you can to protect yourself. Hat, long sleeves, sunglasses. Use sunscreen with a SPF of at least 15 and apply 45 minutes before going out. Use sunscreen even when it's cloudy and avoid tanning salons. We'll talk a little bit about acne. Simple acne is a condition that affects hair follicles associated with oil glands, and oil glands increase during your teenage years and produce larger amounts of oil. These changes are prompted by increasing levels of male hormones called androgens in the blood. And acne is just the inflammation that results when the sebum, the oil, and dead cells clog a duct where the oil gland opens into the hair follicles. These are 3 examples of skin cancer: the basal cell carcinoma, the squamous cell carcinoma, and melanoma. So one of the first things to look for is dark spots that appear on your skin, but also if you have freckles or moles that change shape. There are many misconceptions about the causes of acne. It's not caused by chocolate, pizza, potato chips, or eating nuts. It's not caused by poor hygiene. Follicles plug up from below, so dirt or oil on the skin surface is not responsible. So this is a look at how acne will form: a normal follicle, a follicle with sebum or oil, and then a white head where sebum cells and bacteria accumulate in the follicle, and a black head is where sebum in the clogged follicle oxidizes, mixes with melanin, and causes it to become dark. And an inflamed pimple, the follicle wall will actually rupture, releasing the contents of a white head or a black head into the surrounding epidermis. The final note we'll talk about is homeostasis. This is the constant adjustment made by organ systems to respond to changes in the internal and external environments while limiting too large variations of the internal condition required for life. It depends on the nervous and endocrine systems, which are mostly responsible for internal communication, and it's maintained through what we call negative feedback mechanisms. which is any sort of corrective measure that slows or reverses a variation from a normal value. Once the normal value is reached, corrective measures can cease or stop. We compare this to a positive feedback mechanism that causes a change that promotes continued change in the same direction. Homeostatic mechanisms have three components: a receptor that detects a change, a control center that integrates the information coming from all receptors and selects an appropriate response, and an effector that carries out that response, which can be a muscle or a gland. This is a great video on homeostasis. Please open up the PowerPoint that I also included in this module to watch all the videos in these chapters. So here's an example of using negative feedback to control a variable that can be controlled in homeostasis with a receptor, a control center, and an effector. The hypothalamus and body temperature, for example, of homeostatic regulation of body temperature by negative feedback mechanisms. In this system, the receptors are your thermoreceptors in your skin, the control centers, the hypothalamus in your brain, and the effectors are any sweat glands, blood vessels in the skin, as well as skeletal muscles. Hypothermia is abnormally elevated. Hyperthermia is abnormally elevated body temperature, and hypothermia is abnormally low body temperature. So if normal body temperature increases, thermoreceptors in the skin will detect that, send it to the hypothalamus, and cause your sweat glands to increase their activity to disperse sweat, to try to cool your body down, and also your blood vessels in your skin will widen to also try to disperse that temperature. If your normal body temperature falls below normal, the same thermoreceptors will detect it, send that impulse to the receptors in your hypothalamus, causing your blood vessels to contract and your skeletal muscles to begin shivering to try to create movement to increase body temperature. So from this chapter, you should be able to do the things listed at the end of this PowerPoint. So I'd encourage you to use these slides as just kind of a checklist tool to make sure you know what everything that was covered in this chapter. And again, don't forget to do the mastering assignment and also look at the dynamic study modules. Thanks for listening.